see as well if they want to. And we've got like a record and stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
Feels a bit overkill, I guess, at this stage, but I suppose a lot of what we're trying to do now is sort of setting an example for the future, I guess.
yeah. I think it's a good way to go. That's the thing I like about it is you can kind of, yeah, you can bring in people that you wouldn't think about.
Yeah,
Some
yeah.
people that you know this might have some really good stuff to add. And one of the
Mm,
problems with the stuff we're trying to do is it's all closed shop because everybody talks to everybody that they know.
mm, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Well, like homogenization of opinion, I think,
Yeah, yeah.
scares me. So yeah. Um, how long have you got? Is a good question to start with.
I've got about 45 minutes,
Okay, awesome.
so give me
Yeah.
plenty of time.
Yeah, it's just really nice to chat to you, man. I really felt. Yeah, I was just looking through the words actually, the transcriptions of our conversation. Well, what everyone said at Parliament at the
Yeah, I
event.
was reasonably polite actually at that one. I was on good behaviour.
Yeah. So this is Charlie. We kind
Hey,
of
Charlie.
co-founded Change the
Hello.
Future
How's it
together.
going?
Yeah, pretty good actually. Yeah, I'm joining in to listen and contribute if I have any relevance.
Right. Well, that's good. That's good. None
Hmm.
of us has the answers, so more people the better.
Brilliant.
Yeah. I guess sort of without wanting to kind of yeah chat with you with too much of a predetermined agenda, because while I think it's nice to be organised and stuff, I also like to just sort of be open and yeah, explore opportunities that weren't sort of imagined before and whatever. But something I sort of had in mind, I guess, is maybe you might like to just shoot some holes, basically, if
Yeah.
any, or like to sort of offer your feedback on our sort of our first big stunt, really, I think, for the project, which is this paper prototype thing that I mentioned to you,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, which I've just been speaking to the council about yesterday, finally,
Okay.
because they are hard to get hold of. But yeah, I finally spoke to someone in the events department. And yeah, it's just quite a new forte for me, organising a sort of like public event in the city sort of thing. It's pretty straightforward. It's just an all day long event in the big park in the middle
Yeah.
of Brighton,
Yeah.
where we want to have probably like a 10-foot high, maybe 40-foot wide, simple wall. It's made out of wood, and onto the wall, just put proposals. And all the other sort of forms of interactivity around those proposals that will be facilitated by the Change the Future website. So it's just a paper version of Change the Future, obviously a bit simplified, but I've actually done ridiculously simplified versions of it twice before. Once an NUS event, and once with I volunteer with the Woodcraft folk,
Mm.
and my group is like they're about 8 or 9 years old.
Right.
And we did a super simple version. It was really interesting. It was super simple because we only had proposals, challenges, which is sort of the problem that proposals are trying to solve, and then benefits on one side and concerns on the other side.
Right.
And if they really get it, then also case studies at the bottom, so kind of relevant
Yeah.
to the proposal, real world examples we can actually learn from. But yeah, it just was really hurried. It was like both of them were like 45 minutes, if that, I think, that we had. And you know, it takes about that long to really get people to understand the project and the activity. And yeah, like it takes a while to write stuff and think about stuff, and there wasn't enough time for sort of the purpose of it really, which is the cross pollination of ideas. You know, like me
Mm.
going over to Charlie's proposal and going, oh, I know a case study that's relevant to your idea, or
Yeah.
whatever, and that's kind of where the magic stuff happens, isn't it? So, yeah, it just defies the point, I think, having a small amount of people. Like this process is designed for a large group of people, really, over an all-day thing at least. So, anyway, if I can screen share with you, would you like to have a look at or maybe I can just link you to it, and you
Yeah.
can,
Yeah. Whichever works easiest. Be good to see it.
yeah, okay.
Andy, how much do you know about Change the Future? I don't really know what you know.
Only what I've read on the website and Luke has told me. So not a whole lot, but a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good question. We're just
right.
I went to a democratic school, Andy, and it completely changed me. It helped me a lot because I was having a hideous time in education. Ooh, I'll save that. And yeah, probably when I was 12, 13, and I had a single mum I was living with in Oxford, really hating my teachers and school and just education. As much as I understood, I hated education loads.
Yeah.
And, I was just kind of being a bit of a troublemaker, and yeah, fast forward to my mum kind of just getting really worried about me and my prospects, I guess, not looking really very good. And so she read a book about democratic education and ended up moving us to Devon in the southwest, where I went to a school called Sands. And this is a school that's completely run by a direct democracy. So there's about 80 people, including teachers, in the school, and I think the size really helps. Having gone to a couple of international democratic education conferences and spent pretty decent amount of time at a handful of very different sized schools in different countries that are democratic, I actually really don't think it has to be small. I think it just makes things easier. It's a more forgiving environment for screwing up the democratic process.
But isn't the first thing you learn when you're prototyping or you're thinking through ideas is you start it small and you scale it? So you iron out the problems as you scale. So when people say, one of the things that doesn't work with me is online deliberation because it doesn't scale. And it's not because it won't work, it's because we haven't figured out how to do it.
Man, I really feel like Change the Future is exactly that missing piece of the puzzle, or at least it's seeking to be that. I feel like the thing is, I just believe Change the Future has to be really massive and ambitious and holistic. I don't think there's any point in just having like, should we turn this park, this old overgrown park, into a car park or a playground? Like for or against. I don't know if you've seen Jolitics by Michael Birch, the Bebo guy. Putting the jolliness into politics. I don't know where that website went. It seemed to suddenly disappear, but it had the quite nice little like pie chart or something of agreeability, like how many votes were for and against. But I think personally for me, my opinions have changed quite a lot since Charlie got really interested in non-violent communication and stuff, and looking at how human beings just communicate with each other on the most basic, fundamental level. And so one of the changes that we made in the designs was, instead of having for and against an idea, we have benefits and concerns, which feels more open-minded and conducive to stepping forward in less of a wrestling match.
You know the guys at Lumio, don't you?
Yeah, we chatted to them actually. We did a hangout with them.
Yeah, because they are fantastic. I say this as a Kiwi and I'm biased, but they are just fantastic.
Yeah.
They have just got something that other people haven't got, which is this thing about it's not binary. We keep trying to make this stuff binary, and it's not. The park in a car park is a really interesting example. You need a car park, but you also need a park. So is it a binary conversation about having to remove a park to create a car park, or having to lose car parking to have a green space? But it's totally the wrong question.
I'm really interested in this like crossover point between majority rule and consensus decision making.
No, I don't like consensus. I try and avoid the term consensus. It's not because I have any particular hang-up about it, but the fundamental problem I've got with consensus is consensus usually means mediocrity. So it usually means that to achieve consensus, we have to come up with a solution that we can all live with, but none of us really want.
Yeah.
What I'd much rather do is negotiate a position where we can get to where we're all happy with it. We're all getting what we want.
You want to create abundance. I think it's not consensus. You want to create shared abundance.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you want to create buy-in. You want to create a position where people say, okay, I understand why we're going to do this and I support the overall aim. Even if I don't support actually that individual activity, I actually support where we're trying to get to here. So it's more about the long-term scenario, the vision of what we're trying to get to. So the car park versus park idea, instead of it being, is this a park or a car park, it's more about, well, what's our strategic view of where we want to be as a city?
Right.
What do we value most?
Oh,
yeah. What do we value
give me just
most?
one second. Ren? Yeah? Where's that what leads to board that you made? I want to show it to... I don't know, I think I accidentally typed it, didn't you? Which one? There's two of them. How to take over the world. I log into my account and probably get it. Do you reckon there's any chance you could like make it available to share in this conversation? Like within the next sort of few minutes? Yeah, I'm just quickly putting my stuff in the other room. Yeah, that'd be sick. So there's a website called whatleads.to, as in T-O.
Yeah, yeah.
Them emailed me. The owners of What Leads To?
Yeah, and they were like, we saw your thing and we think that it's contributors like you that are exciting and blah blah blah, blah really funny and stuff. I was like, oh, no.
Did you hear that, Andy?
No.
So What Leads To is...
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah. So I think, in my mind, there's like 3 pillars to change the future. And it's this sort of layout, this approach that I think makes it unique, as far as I can tell. I haven't seen any other web-based initiative that tries to do all 3 of these. So there's crowdsourcing the overall strategy, which I think is quite along the lines of what leads to. So bringing any number of people to define an ultimate aim, and then
what leads to is it's just a theory of change model, isn't it?
Yeah, but so it's got some like voting tools inside it, and conversation can happen.
I haven't seen those. I've just seen the summary of it.
Okay. Yeah, well, you can fully play with it now, and my housemate Ren, who's a fascinating chap, he just got a bit obsessive with it, sort of stayed up all night, I guess, like creating this whole theory of change strategy for how to most efficiently take over the world. And at first I thought this was going to be like a silly, funny thing, but then I was like, this is actually a really quite
actually somewhere in the madness there's a good idea.
Yeah, like it's more of a kind of warning, I think, like kind of looking at global destabilization and use of the media and messages to kind of just concentrate.
The big problem with theory of change is because if you go into the campaigning charity sector, they all, they have their own inclusive language. So theory of change is one of those ways that they talk to each other to make sure the public doesn't understand. And theory of change is simply a theory. And where it always falls down for me is they're great on expounding the theory of change, but they're rarely good at actioning it. So actually what I like is someone who talks about it's not a theory of change, it's a model for change, it's an actual action for change. So you get it out of the theory. You don't need another theory for change. What we need is someone to just fucking do it. Actually get up and do it.
But so what I think is important though is that proposals aren't just isolated little islands of conversation and debate, but they're more connected. So like schools, for example, are an area that I feel like I have a bit more experience in than a lot of sort of social issues. And I feel like schools are very isolated. I feel like those walls, protect children from strangers, but they also protect the school from good ideas and beautiful kind of approaches to teaching and engaging young people. And, and they block all that out. But so, for example, bullying is an enormous problem that can destroy lives and is every day across the whole country, let alone world. And I want to see on Change the Future, a year from now, I want to see a challenge proposed on there, like bullying, or maybe specifically bullying in secondary school, or it's flexible. And then clicking that challenge, you can see sort of like a mind map of lots and lots of different proposals that address that problem. And they're always ordered, so they'll be ordered by default with the most the trending or most popular ones at the top, or maybe even if a school has tried an initiative like Roots of Empathy program or something like that, they can then reflect on it and say how much it felt like that helps the school, and especially if students and teachers have ratings for the school, not just good school, bad school, as you say, but more like, you can do a simple sort of 5-star rating like a product on Amazon or something, but there's more options if you want to talk about the food and the teaching and the free spaces in the school and things like that. I want there to be like a more open, free sort of way of feeding back on things like schools.
It's how do you make that more holistic? So how do you create an active learning cycle around that feedback? So it's not just the eBay or the Amazon one. Amazon one's probably a bit better because it's a bit more responsive. But how do you create someone taking an action, thinking critically about it, and then other people feeding into it, so it becomes a whole action learning cycle, and the thing moves on? Because I think that's the big thing we're missing in democracy. Democracy actually at the moment is it's like an iceberg. 90-odd% of it happens, if not in secret, certainly on the quiet. The 10% that's in the public domain is kind of, it's often broadcast and linear. But we've got to get to this point where actually it's more iterative. If you think of it as agile, we just got to try things, go back and try them and explore them and evaluate them. So actually the key bit to that is building in active learning. Because when you develop active learning cycles, you are automatically in the process going to be reflexive and critically question what you've done and go back and feed it into the process. So the next time you run it, you're running it differently. And making that open and crowdsourced is a fantastic way of doing it, because you're going to get the problem with active learning cycles is the only people doing the learning are the ones who are active, because they're the only ones who care about it. So how would you widen that out? And I think crowdsourcing and doing stuff online and sharing the stuff is a really good way to widen out the learning process.
Where are you at, Andy, with projects at the moment in terms of, I know you advise lots of groups and organisations and even governments and stuff, don't you? But on
lots
democratic
of
process,
weird, wonderful people. Actually, I'm not that busy at the moment because I've just turned down. I'm supposed to be in Latin America at the end of this month, and I've just turned it down because I didn't fancy 17 hours on a plane. I've just been doing too much travelling. So I was supposed to be working with the Chilean Chamber of Deputies on some stuff, and I can do stuff remotely rather than have to be there. So that's freed me up quite considerably. My busyness at the moment is I've got a book coming out at the end of the month.
Oh, wow.
So going to be doing some book launch between here and here in Sweden.
Oh, wicked.
Brussels, hopefully.
And what's the book?
Let's go. There we go.
From arrogance to intimacy. Nice.
2 words that scare the shit out of people. It's really funny when we develop the work that we do. This has come out of work that I do in local government in Sweden, but it's also based on a lot of parliamentary work and stuff in New Zealand. And we tell people that they're arrogant, they don't like it. They have a real reaction, and you tell local government that they're arrogant, they have this real sort of, oh, no we're not, no we're not. They really argue about it. And then we say, well, it's okay, because what we want to do is help you become intimate. And they go, oh, God, that's a bit scary. I don't know if I want to be intimate with the public. So we figured they're 2 really good words that just scare them. So we stuck with it. We had so many people say, could you just tone it down a bit, change the words? I'm like, no, it works. So that's a year's work in there, and that comes out at the end of the month.
Man, I feel like so much of this conversation and this sort of work in this field comes down to such a simple idea, really. I think that it actually would be really irresponsible to give loads more voice to just the general public. Like if you just go to someone in the street and get their most passionate opinions about the thing they're most like riled up about, I think quite probably it's going to be a pretty limited world view, and actually it would be pretty terrifying to just give more voice and power and influence to the people. I think what really excites me is the idea of giving in equal measure to more power and voice and influence, to give This is Zoe. This is it's our first official intern for Change the Future.
Hi, Zoe.
She's come down from Leeds to volunteer on Change the Future
Right.
for a few weeks. So I think a responsible system for empowering the public and engaging them in change making and a better democracy, I think it's got to come in equal measures. Peer-to-peer education, so not like some Rupert Murdoch type. I have all the answers and I'll educate the masses, and then you'll know what you're on about, and then you can have a voice. But more like create an infrastructure and a really meticulously, beautifully, elegantly designed process for people to teach each other in this conversational space, which really uses some of the principles of things like nonviolent communication, where people who normally would be at each other's throats can hopefully, as much as possible, really try and see other people's point of view in their local community or their organisation, their school or country. And we can start talking about issues even like immigration and all sorts of quite controversial things.
We use some techniques in the work that we do, particularly around contentious situations.
Give me 1 sec just to shut the door because it's suddenly got a bit noisy now. Sorry, what are you saying, Andy?
So we use stuff that comes out, a lot of stuff that comes out of South Africa, things like scenario planning, which are models for engaging people in conflict, to resolve the conflict, not by coming up with the answers, but very much by starting to share stuff. So we have a process that we use, which is about it's a non-confrontational form of conversation, which is really interesting. So it's a lengthy dialogue process, and it involves a number of stages, which is teasing out ideas and ultimately actually agreeing on what you can agree, and then working out what it is you have to all give up to get there.
So you find one thing that everybody agrees on. So
it's
example,
sometimes not even one. Sometimes it's a couple of things that people can. Usually, in fact, it's 2 or 3 that people have got broad agreement are all a good idea. Just big picture stuff. But when this stuff's been used, it's been used in. I mean, this was developed to resolve armed conflict. So when we use it in local government around housing, say, it's kind of like in some ways it's overkill. But the good thing about that is it's got lots of tools in place because it's been designed to deal with people who are at war with each other, and it works. It's fantastic stuff.
I feel like human beings do actually want the more sort of bigger picture, more fundamental aims and objectives. I think people agree on most. I think what people disagree on is approaches to things, isn't it? Like if you get 2 people, one is kind of just open the borders, for example, of countries. Another person's like immigration is destroying the culture of Britain or something.
Yeah, but that's the thing, you see, when you get to that immigration as a problem, you actually deconstruct why. Most of the reasons people have for why aren't true. But you can't tell them that because you can't tell them they're wrong. So what you have to do is have a conversation so that they can learn for themselves that actually there are other issues here, and there are some negatives to immigration and there's some benefits, and actually it's a balance.
Yeah, so I'm so interested in what we can learn, what Change the Future as a primarily web-based project and conversational and change-making space, virtual space, what that can learn in terms of its design and its facilitation of conversation between people. What it can learn from the best facilitators in real life, sort of face-to-face situations. So, like my summer job is with the Challenge, where you're working with especially diverse groups of young people. They've actually been quite cunningly picked for their diversity. So you end up with these they almost look like an HSBC advert photo or something. Just such a diverse group of young people who spend a few weeks really getting to know each other, hiking and camping and doing various activities and trying to really open their mind about different perspectives and lifestyles and backgrounds, cultures and religions. And I think so the facilitators there have to do a lot of work about creating a safe space where people trust each other enough to become vulnerable and open up and things. And I think I've just not really felt like there's really many websites or web-based projects that believe that they can go that deep with kind of human relationships, and I really think you can. And you can see little glimmers of it when you compare websites that do really similar things, but in slightly different ways. They encourage slightly different behaviours, like Yahoo Answers versus Quora.
Yeah.
Just the quality of responses, or even YouTube versus Vimeo. The comments you get on YouTube videos sometimes make my stomach turn. And then on Vimeo, there's like a generally really supportive community.
Yeah. Although that's interesting, because a lot of the time that comes down to the, if you take it to a government level, the constitutional framework that the discourse happens in. So YouTube was just the Wild West. Once they changed it so you had to log in, the quality of the comments went up mildly. But it's like The Guardian. The Guardian really surprises me. I've written for The Guardian, and one of the things they say is just go and check the comments. And it's like, no, actually, I can't be asked, because the quality of the comments on The Guardian is so low. So I probably look at them twice. And basically what it is half the people will say, yeah, this is fantastic, I really agree. And the other half will just slag you off.
Yeah.
And so, well, what did I learn from that? What was the point? So I just don't bother.
Isn't it? Like, you wouldn't do that. Or half those people who slag you off just wouldn't do that if you actually took the time to sit with them and say, hi, do you want a coffee?
Well, I wouldn't mind if they did, but at least I would respond and point out why they were idiots.
But I wonder if part of it is creating a space of trying to have an opinion rather than asking questions, because I've noticed just in personal spaces that when you make assumptions about stuff, there's often a barrier. But if you question stuff together from the same point, you often lead to the same place.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually. Questions are a lot less threatening. And also they show some vulnerability, so they make you less threatening. It's one of these things, when you go to any of these debates on democracy, or anything actually, anything that involves anyone who considers themselves mildly intelligent, they sit around the room listening to a panel of experts talking together and then stand up and, under the guise of a question, make a statement. And it's all ego driven. They just want to stand up and you know them as well, because you go to these events and you know these people are going to stand up and they're going to make the same statement that they made at the last one, which is basically whatever their little hobby horse is. and everybody just sort of go, oh God. And one of the arts of chairing those debates is to spot them and avoid them, so you don't give them the chance to do it. And actually the ones that really surprise you are the people sometimes that you don't know, who are at the back of the room and suddenly just ask the most brilliant question, because often it's naive. And they often start by saying, oh, I'm not an expert in this, but I was just wondering. And you get much more out of that.
That made me think about, like, when you bring kids into a space, because they often just break down all the bullshit, all of the arrogance.
Yeah.
You go, what's that about? And they go, oh, we have to answer a question now.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And don't use questions and statements as methods of controlling the power in the meeting. And it's really, I'm just framing something at the moment. I'm working on a project at the moment which is very early days. It's not even alpha. It's like whatever comes before that. I don't know. But it's about how you create a democracy hack that doesn't involve middle-class boys with ponytails or beards. Because all the time we do hacks, basically we assume it's about developing an app. And I don't always think it is. I mean, it might be, but actually we've missed the point. I mean, it's like, it goes back to the car park versus park question. If we have a hack day where the aim is to develop the app, then we've missed the point of what we're trying to solve. So what I've started with is this idea that the first phase of it is crowdsourcing ideas that all have to start with, I want a better way to. And you have to frame everything in terms of, I want a better way to. So there's no, this is broken, it's all wrong, blah, 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 I want to whinge about it. You have to say, I want a better way to provide social housing. I want a better way to do recycling. I want a better way to do whatever. And it can be based on a problem, and probably is. But I'm trying to structure this so it's framed as, it is almost a question. You know, do we have a? Can you come up with a better way? Because the second phase is, and it's interesting for what you're trying to do with the outdoor stuff and getting people engaged. Is if you start with crowdsourcing, I want a better way too. The second phase is, have you thought about?
Yeah.
And then what are the constraints? What are the opportunities? So it's almost three phases. I want a better way to do this. Have you thought about? Here are some constraints. Here are some opportunities. And then you start working to a solution. And at that point, you start designing. I think in a group, and it's this is a whiteboard, not a laptop. You start drawing stuff up with post-it notes, whatever, talking about it, just have a conversation. You start moving to scoping the solution. And only then do you go, well, actually, now we've figured out this is what we need to do. How do we develop that? Is it just something we need to change in a rule? Is it a process? Is it an app? Is the process already there but it's inaccessible, in which case an app is really good? Is the process broken and it's inaccessible, in which case we need to change both the process and develop the interface to it? So it's trying to step back a whole lot further than let's have a hack day and develop an app.
Yeah.
Because an app,
as you describe that, I just get a rush back of endless memories about critiquing the way we do things within ChangeTheFuture, from how we host files to how we host a meeting and we check in at the beginning, and how we take minutes, and how we manage tasks and bounce ideas. And like one that comes up a lot is we have like 4 values for the project, and nothing's set in stone. You know, this is all kind of like stuff that can change, but these feel like really good values that just suddenly appeared, which were openness, like real interactivity with the whole world, like really inviting anybody to access it. Transparency, so everything about the project, apart from passwords for logging into things, every single resource we have, which over the last
100% transparent then.
Huh?
What was that? Not 100% transparent.
Yeah, 99% transparent. But we will share the passwords document with anyone, as long as they just like talk to us a bit and just say why they're interested in stuff. And then cooperation and democracy. And so we really try and embody those values when we're working together. In fact, I try and embody them just generally in my life.
I think they're really good. It's interesting. I mean, I'm just thinking, in the book that we're writing, we've set out 4 principles right at the start, because the idea of this book is it's not just a book that sits on the shelf, so it's the start of a conversation. So this is phase 1, and we want to put out our ideas because we then want people to read it and come back to us with their ideas, and we want to incorporate those into the second edition of the book. So we want people to co-create the book with us, because we don't have the answers. I mean, how could we? We were talking about democracy being arrogant. How arrogant would it be to write a book saying this is how you fix it? You know, it's madness. It's amazing how many people do. But we've got there's 4 principles in here, which is: 1 is control is overrated. The second is power used to create personal advantage always fails. And the third is crowds are better at creating the future. Crowds are better at creating the future. And the 4th one is self-reflection helps understand the impact of our actions.
What about love?
Well, I guess actually it probably comes into the power used in the wrong way always fails. Because actually, if you apply power if you use power with people, that is an act of love.
Yep.
So you don't use power over, you use power with. So yeah, it's based on the principle that if we're trying to carve out these niches for personal gain, you're always hitting resistance, because you're just up against other people doing the same. But actually, it's there's infinite opportunity in the way we can reshape democracy, and if we all do it together, what we'll end up with is a lot better. Now, there's a very small group of people who completely disagree with that premise, and they're the ones that run everything. So that's the challenge.
I don't think I disagree, but I'm open to learn about what the truth is, whether it is that or something else.
Yeah, I don't think there is any truth. I think it's
all stories.
Yeah, there are lots of stories, but there's no single truth, because reality is different. So that's the thing. We've got to be able to accept that different versions of reality are all true.
Yeah, this is good. This leads me on to thinking about trust and related to people understanding each other's stories, each other's perspectives.
Yeah.
As you say, there is no single truth. There's only each individual's experience and reflection and perspective. So the more we can spread the understanding of other people's perspectives, other people's stories, the more we can learn to work together.
Yeah. So the way the system works at the moment is it uses fear to create distrust. So we distrust migrants, we distrust bankers. Now that one might be reasonably accurate, but you know, the whole system is based on, oh, we distrust the Scots to be independent, or we distrust them to decide about their independence, even though we tell them it's their decision. We're really secretly telling them not to be so stupid. So it's all based on distrust, because when you have power over, you can't give people choice, you have to control them. So if power and trust are both interconnected, so if you use power with, trust rises. If you use power over, trust declines. The reason we've got low levels of trust in politics and democracy and democratic systems is because they're all systems that are based on having power over people.
Power with is to empower.
Yeah. Yeah. Empower is maybe a bad term given the power company, because they're, you know, but yeah, I mean, just we've got to get out of this model of having to control. It's really interesting. I mean, Brighton's a fantastic example. You look at the Greens, and you think, oh, the Greens, they've got this really democratic, collaborative model. They get into power, and they're worse than the rest of them. They're just absolutely appalling. Their true colours come out. And they're, I think, they're one of the worst councils in Britain.
How come? What are you most offended by with them?
Oh, I think the thing that got me is their complete hypocrisy, that they came in saying we're working for people, we're working for the, you know, we're for the workers, and the first thing they did is cut all the contracts and screwed around with all the council services. They just acted in exactly the same way as any Labour or Tory council would have done. There was no imagination in there at all.
This is why there's the massive rubbish wasn't picked up on the streets. The bin strikes.
Yeah. They had a real opportunity to go in and do something different, and just totally didn't.
I think, yes. Do you want to see this what leads to board thing?
Yeah, I've got about 10 minutes. I'm going to have to go, but that'd be good.
Pop open your browser and go to whatleads.to/taking-over-the-world.
Over.
Look at it.
Oh, I actually got that right. Brilliant. Okay.
This is what happens when your housemate is ridiculously creative and obsessive and has ME and is locked in the bedroom for ages.
I'm interested in creating the perfect condition which encourages small-scale wars to destabilize continental infrastructures. Has he been working in Ukraine or something?
Yeah, I want to look at this more. I think he's tweaked it. He's done a huge one for ME, which he's been struggling with for. He's got quite severe ME. He really peaks and troughs. And,
right. So when he's on a peak, he's busy solving the world's problems in here. This is really interesting, actually.
But I like the interactivity of it, that you can change the privacy settings so anyone can comment on it or even edit it.
Yes.
And anyone can vote on it as well, so they can say how much they agree with that aim leading to a greater aim.
There's a really interesting book I've just been reading, and unfortunately you can't buy it here. I think it's on Kindle, but it's called Dirty Politics, and it's about the short story is this very right-wing blogger in New Zealand who is a total shit. Actually, he's a really nasty piece of work. His dad used to be the chairman of the New Zealand equivalent of the Conservatives, and he's just a weasel in human form. hacked his web server and downloaded, basically nicked all his email archive and his Facebook chats, and handed them over to this investigative journalist who's written up this book. And what it shows is this shadow web of how the National Party, which is the equivalent of the Conservatives and currently in government, has been using right-wing bloggers to destabilize the media conversation. So they're basically launching these really quite vile character assassinations on anybody that got in their way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, really interesting. It's fascinating. And it's exactly what's happening here. It's exactly how Guido Fawkes works. He's just fed stuff. It's how Weber Shandwick and these people all operate. It just happens on a different scale here. So it would be harder to expose. But this is, yeah, it is the most fantastic insight into the way that the right wing and the neoliberal parties, the Republicans are doing this, the Tories are doing this, National are doing this in New Zealand, Liberals are doing it in Australia, and they're all using the same people. As Linton Crosby is heavily involved in all of this. It's really, really interesting stuff.
So what did you learn about the root causes of that behaviour?
It's power.
Okay,
It is exactly. It's all about power. It's about holding on to power. There's a document that got leaked by one of the people behind this, which basically is, this is how we ensure. It's a 3-page strategy to move political conversation to the right, to guarantee power for a very small minority of people.
Mm-hmm. But those people have gained a sense of wanting power from somewhere. It doesn't just emerge from nowhere, right?
Yeah, when it's systemic, isn't it? This is the problem.
Yeah.
In some ways, they're reacting to a system that they're in.
Yeah. So I guess I'm most curious about what the structure is that's creating that behaviour and how to change it.
Yes. Well, part of that's visible and part of it's invisible. But the challenge is with any system that if you want to change a system, you have to disrupt it. Mm-hmm. So in a way, what they've done is they've disrupted the system in a very insidious way by shifting the system to work more in the favour of the people who are in it or in control of it. What we have to do is disrupt the system to make it more in the favour of the majority, work in the favour of the majority of people. At which point you can reshape and reform and create new systems.
Yeah.
That's why revolution doesn't work.
Are you seeing the group chat, Andy, in the side of this conversation window? I put a link to Trello. Do you see that?
Yes.
If you click that, that's our task board. That's everything that we feel needs to be done to drive Change the Future forward as a project.
Oh, fantastic.
And you can see at the top that, well, obviously this is completely open and public. Anybody can comment on it but not edit it.
Yeah.
I've seen some really interesting uses of Trello. I've seen a council in Finland or somewhere that is saying all of the things that they're doing in the city, and they've even color-coded everything into like transport, education, healthcare, and the local residents can comment on each of the action points. So everyone can log on there and just see what's happening over the next week.
That's
fantastic. Like in Brighton, I was told by a councillor here that something like 700 decisions are made every day on my behalf in this city, and I don't even know what they are, let alone have any opportunity to influence those decisions in any way, really.
And actually there's an interesting point there. The sheer scale of that, you couldn't. It's just one of the problems when you get into more deliberative models, is you then have to get into this idea of prioritizing.
I think what I most want to help facilitate is connecting people with the things that they know most about and that they care most about, rather than sort of suggesting that people have to influence every decision, or things that they really are clueless about. Like in my democratic school, just kids wouldn't put their hand up to vote on something about a child protection issue or some planning permission contract thing if that's something that the teachers know way more about. Implications may be discussed, and the teachers will respect the opinions of the kids there, because they know the kids will spend extra time and listen and think before they use their very powerful vote. Generally the kids know what their areas of expertise are and where they should most use their power of voting, and other things they step back a little bit and allow the staff to kind of make more decisions.
So That's a really interesting point. When you make democracy, really participatory democracy, normative, people are able to work out where and when to contribute.
Yeah, right. Do you want to come and visit my old school? Should we get them together and check it out?
I'd love to have a look at it. It sounds fantastic.
I nearly went to Summerhill, which is the only other truly direct democratic school in England. But it's a boarding school, whereas the Sands School where I went it's been running for 28 years, same age as me, and
magical.
It's a little smaller, but yeah, it's a day school, and it's just so funny because the previous school I've been to, the taxpayer was paying 27 grand a year for me to go there and be picked up in a taxi with bouncers in the classrooms and just like, you know, and this school is £9,000 a year, and you know the government wouldn't pay for it, so my mum is having to, you know, take ridiculous measures to pay for me to go to that school, while not actually we're not seeing any of the public allocation for my education. You know?
Yeah, of course.
So
now you can education. That's actually one of the good things that they've done with free schools, because now you could fund that publicly.
Yeah,
so you could actually
a little bit about that, and actually it seems like they would have to fit into boxes quite a lot too.
Yeah,
because it's a very radical school.
It's funny that it's radical. Isn't it funny how we supposedly live in a democracy, but the term democratic school is alien to most people?
Yeah, the amount of people are just like, what is that? And I'm like, you should be asking that about your society. What is a democratic society? Like, what is your cut-off point, actually? Literally, you get to vote once every 8 years instead of 4, and there's only 2 parties, and you have to win £50,000 to even become on the map if you want to make a party. Like, what actually genuinely is people's cut-off point? I want to hear people's answers to that.
Yeah, it's an interesting question.
Opportunity to vote every single day with our actions that we do.
But that's not part of our actual democratic process.
No one needs to pay attention to that if they don't want to.
No, right.
Anyway, man, like I would basically love the more input you have on this Brighton paper prototype event, the happier I am personally. Because I feel
I'll send you. I'm just writing up some notes on that stuff I was talking about before, and I'll send you a scribbles on it. It won't be fully thought through, but I'll just send it to you anyway. There is something I was going to suggest you look at. There's some guys in Lithuania.
Yeah.
I don't know if they still run it, but they had this thing called Web Zero.
Okay.
And Web Zero was basically they took the internet offline. So they created a blog and a social network in a town square, just using notice boards, and you could pin things to the notice board. So you could post comments, upload stuff as well. So if you had something that you didn't need, you could upload it, and other people could download it. So you could give stuff away. So let's say you had, I don't know, a bar of chocolate in your pocket that you decided you didn't need. You could upload the bar of chocolate, and someone who did want it could take the bar of chocolate.
That reminds me a little bit of what you were saying, Zoe, about Zoe lived in Findhorn a little bit, the Findhorn community.
Oh yeah.
And you were saying there was that like space, the magic cupboard or something.
There's a tiny little shop called the Boutique, and you just drop off your stuff that you don't want, and other people can take it for free.
Yeah, that's a fantastic idea. We should do more of that. Now, I mean, the Lithuanian thing was about just stimulating conversations, and they used to video stuff. So when people posted stuff, they'd video what they were saying, and they'd curate the whole thing. So at the end of the day, they'd upload a video and some pictures and conversations about what was happening. But it was really about using it was a bit silly in a way. It was really light and silly, but it was actually about it was an educational project about getting people to see the value of that social interaction. And instead of just doing it online, hey, you can do it offline as well. You can actually do it face to face. So it's really, really fun project. It's actually really neat. But there's probably some good ideas in some of the things they did and some of the learning that would be useful for you guys. When are you going to run this?
Hopefully in about a month, I think. But I have been known to underestimate the length of time things take. So
Yeah, you might. I don't know with it, but it's.
Um,
I'd still go for it. I'd still aim for that. The trouble is, you don't want to leave it too late, or the weather will be a bit miserable.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think what I really want to do is not just. I don't want to just dismantle this wall at the end of the day. It's really important to me.
Yeah.
We can take it somewhere. So we've been donated a pretty big office space, and I think as long as the wall can dismantle, we could fit a large structure in there.
Well, it can dismantle as long as you build it so it can dismantle. So that's kind of goes into the planning, isn't it?
Yeah. A final question before you run away. Just give me a vivid picture of, in the sort of medium to short term, maybe, of like something that you want to create for people, like what you want someone to feel who's interacting with whatever you've helped to create, whether you feel like most of all that's your book or a project. Like, I want to know, like, I think it's so easy to talk about strategy and approaches and liberation and stuff, but I feel like that's what I try and always come back to, is I'm trying to ultimately create something to interface with human beings right now outside of this project, and I think, what does that look like? What are they feeling and thinking and doing differently?
Yeah. The big thing for me, whenever I talk about this stuff, and it doesn't matter actually whether it's with politicians or officials or with people, and with the book, people reading the book, what I want them to do is, I just, the win for me is someone reads the stuff I've written or hears me say something and actually goes, yeah, actually I can do this. It convinces them that it's worth doing something, because I think the big problem at the moment is too many of us don't actually believe it's worth the effort, and I think it is actually worth the effort. In fact, the problem we've got at the moment is the less people trust the system, the more politicians are corrupt and dodgy and dubious, the less we trust them, the less we engage. The less we engage, the more dodgy, dubious they become, because they have more control. So if we actually want honest politicians, and we want a system that we trust and that works, we actually have to get involved, because the more we avoid it, the worse it gets. It's actually a self-fulfilling prophecy of politicians aren't trustworthy, so we won't engage with them. So they're less trustworthy because there's less scrutiny, less held to account. It's a smaller gene pool that they're drawing from, and they're appointing their mates. So actually, if you want to fix the problem, get involved. And so every time I say anything or write anything or do anything, if one person hears it and goes, actually, I could that's convinced me I should at least try, I think that's the best thing we can do. We just have to do more of it. Do more often.
Do more of what?
Whatever it is you want to do, whatever it is you're passionate about, whatever it is you think that's going to make a difference. There's room in the space for everybody. There's room for Occupy, going around throwing rocks and shouting, but that'll never win, because it's not an intellectual debate and it doesn't change the system. So then we need to bring people on board who are, okay, I get what they're saying, and I can engage in a conversation in how this process can change, so I can design new systems. But then we need people who say, well, actually, I understand how the power works at the moment, and I can start bridging this conversation. So there are people there. And actually, for all the dismissing of politicians and government, unless we bring them in, we won't win, because we're just, again, it's friction. We're just creating friction. It's much easier to go with people. So there's room in this for everybody. If all you can do... So all you have time to do or feel able to do is sign a petition. Okay, I'm not a great fan of petitions, but do it. And if if that gives you a bit of, that's the place where you are, and you feel that's all you can do, do it. Then the next time, maybe turn up for something, or write a letter, or or go along. Vote. Actually, voting, that's pretty important. Even if you don't believe in the system, you won't change it by going, oh, I don't believe in the system, so I don't vote.
Then who do you vote for?
Oh, God knows. I've got this problem with the vote. I have sitting here, actually, on my desk, which I've just spilt water on. That's my voting paper for the New Zealand general election in 2 weeks' time. And I have 2 votes. I have a party vote and a candidate vote. And my candidate vote, I have just been moved. My constituency has just been moved because it's based on where I used to live. And the Prime Minister is now my MP. And I can't stand him. And he has a huge majority. My old constituency, the leader of the opposition, was my MP, and he's a friend of mine. So I've been moved from one extreme to the other. So I don't know how I'm going to vote, but I'm probably going to vote for an independent candidate on there because I just think she's fantastic and it'll make a statement. But I have 2 votes. I also get to vote for the party of my choice. So whereas in the UK, my vote, I live in Hackney, I've got a Labour MP with a 55% majority. If I don't support her, it's a waste of time. It's nothing I can do. It's a totally wasted vote, as 90% of the population has. But with this system, I've got to choose a party, and because it's a proportional system, I can actually have some real influence. So my party vote, my candidate vote is irrelevant in here. It doesn't matter who I vote for, but my party vote could be really decisive.
Oh, Andy, I've got a question.
Yeah.
In your mind, what is the purpose of a government or a democracy?
Well, the short answer is it's to govern.
What does that mean?
It's to make it's basically to bring. It's to make the decisions that make society work and to act for the benefit of the people in that society.
I like the feeling of that, but there's a lot of blurry words.
Yeah, exactly. That's the problem, because you then get down to, well, who makes those decisions? So if you're talking about a representative democracy, we by default have to say, well, we're going to trust these people to do it. And then the majority of people in government are employees. It's a really interesting term. We used to call them civil servants or public servants. And I think we shouldn't lose sight of that, because public servant is exactly what they are. They are there to serve the public.
Used to be civil servants, public servants. And now it's employees. Do you know when that shifted?
Sorry?
You know when that shifted?
It must have been recently.
No, not really. I just think it's the general. There's a general shift in the language around government. It's this whole neoliberal language of technocracy that shifts the conversation into government delivering a service, and you're not a citizen, you're a customer.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that's a whole other conversation, because as soon as you say that I'm a customer receiving a service, privatizing it seems less painful. And suddenly you realize why the right uses that language. But yeah, that's also about civil servants becoming staff and becoming delivery managers and commissioners, and they're not the servants, they work for us. So if they're not working for us, then democracy isn't working.
Yeah. The word that stands out to me that you use, which I don't understand what it means in your head, is society working. Society works. Because that can mean literally anything.
Yeah, but one of the things is we often try and nail down definitions, and I think sometimes when we nail down definitions we create problems, because it's never going to work for everybody. Even in a perfect society, it's not going to work for everybody. There's always someone going to be pissed off with something sometime. But what it's got to do is it's got to have permeable boundaries. It's an ecosystem. It's not a Formula One racing engine that has to work perfectly in alignment. It's this ecosystem that things can coexist in, and some of that coexistence is friction, because progress comes from friction.
Yeah, I like that. I guess for me, when you ask what works, it opens up more questions about what it means to be human and what it means to work in relationships with groups of people.
Yeah.
And then it opens up like, okay, well, what makes a person feel content and satisfied and successful, and what does it mean to be successful? I think they're really important questions, because that should surely determine where you even start in the first place.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a lot of agenda. I think they're absolutely right. But you won't get the same answer out of 2 people.
No, you won't. But I think it's a very important question. Otherwise, it feels like even creating a democracy is sort of like a red herring.
But it comes back to Luke's thing before about democracy school. And, we teach people in school. The whole point of the education system is to teach people to conform. Yeah. And so it's to sacrifice personal happiness for the system.
Yeah. So have you heard of Krishnamurti?
Yeah.
One of the things he said, which was really nice, is like basically to truly observe a problem is to know the solution.
Mm.
So if you're not truly observing and truly just being able to see how things are connected and really understand what's going on, you'll never be able to come up with a solution that works, that does anything. You'll just end up in the same cycle over and over again, repeat history.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. This is why a lot of democracy is about listening.
Mm-hmm.
You know about Koios? I feel like they're the strongest thing as a web platform working in this kind of field is that they go so deep into pulling apart problems and deeply understanding problems. They don't. It doesn't feel to me like they at the moment really have so like legs to kind of actually action changes in a particularly powerful way, but they really help us to kind of deeply disseminate and get our heads around and observe.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I don't think anybody has the answer. I don't think there's. I mean, particularly in the web, one of the things I keep saying to people, I meet people all the time who've just written this app, and I just sit there. One of my friends described it the other day as our job is to walk around and jump on the heads of small puppies. Because we sit and listen to them tell us about this thing that they've just developed, this app which is going to solve all the problems, and we just go, but it won't work. And most of the time the reason it won't work is because they haven't connected it together. So when you look at Lumio on its own won't work. And Lumio know that. Lumio sees itself as part of an ecosystem. There are times in the democratic process where Lumio is perfect. There are times in the democratic process where Citizens Foundation stuff in Iceland is fantastic. But there are also times when neither of them work. And actually what we have to do, and I've been trying to facilitate this without any great success, partly due to complete lack of resources, is get people like Lumio and Citizens Foundation and you guys, in fact, and anybody that wants to, is to work together as a kind of democratic collective.
Hello. Have you heard of Collab Camp Amsterdam?
Yeah, yeah.
Are you interested in going to that? Because we're.
I could be. I don't know if I can. I think as a. When's it on? I think I looked at it.
4th to the 8th of October, but we're co-hosting it.
Right. No, that's right. I can't because I'm in Edinburgh. I have to be in Scotland.
Well, I think that's a really interesting initiative that feels like it's a little bit about ego and brand, I think, and that feels like a white label, brandless initiative that isn't going to be like, Change the Future set this up. It's got, if you look on the Facebook event, for example, it's got co-hosts, but that's about as far as it goes to kind of saying, putting badges on anything, it's really just saying, here's a space, here's some time, here's some food, and let's make a bit of a plan together about how to combine our resources and ideas.
Yeah, I think it's a really good way to go. I think that's what it needs. It doesn't want some kind of formal thing. It just needs people who will collaborate and fill in different parts of the puzzle and can work together. And partly stop reinventing the wheel. So many people have written the same app. It's kind of a bit of a waste, really. I mean, maybe one's better than the other, but actually if we just shared ideas, we could just think, if you used all that energy to pool ideas and generate stuff. I mean, I think Brighton would be a really interesting place to do stuff, because I love coming down to Brighton because the energy there is so much better. It's really in London it's really hard because the focus in London is all about the length of your beard and your VC funding in Shoreditch, and it's just corrupt because most of those companies in Shoreditch aren't real companies and they're never going anywhere. It's just kind of I don't know what they're doing, but they're just keeping themselves busy until the daddy's credit card runs out, I think. Yeah. But I think in Brighton it's a much more grassroots thing going on there, and there's much more creativity in the democratic stuff there. I mean, I guess the other end of the extreme is, I'm a governor of DemSoc.
Oh,
right, yeah.
So I think they're operating at a very different level to you, but actually, in a way, the two of you become the opposite ends of the continuum. And if you're working with someone like DemSoc and working with some of the other groups in Brighton, I think that then creates a real space for the stuff you want to do about a physical event. DemSoc's good at organising physical events. It's got links into the council. It's got those relationships. So there are partnerships there that you can use.
Yeah.
and it's kind of, you know, how do we all, we're all working in the same direction. We don't have to agree on what that direction necessarily looks like at the end, and we don't have to do the same thing. But actually, it's not a competition. I think that's the big thing. It's actually, it should all be collaborative.
Would you like to help us explore how we can use this paper prototype event in Brighton to apply as much as possible of what we've all learned about good democratic, holistic democratic processes?
I'd really like to help you with it, because actually I think what you're trying to do there is a key part of the thinking I'm doing at the moment that I can't quite work out how it's gonna materialize. I think actually what you're trying to do is so similar that it'd be really interesting for me to explore that as well.
I will feed you dinner. You can stay in my house. We can go for a nice walk, and yeah, just take ownership over it. You know, like I feel like that's one of the biggest struggles with Change the Future, but
yeah,
it's one that we are slowly overcoming. I think just making this project something that people genuinely believe they can actually take ownership of. Because I think first it can look a bit intimidating, like, oh, everyone else knows better than me, or in your case, maybe less of that and maybe more like, I don't know, this is just somebody else's idea, possibly. I don't know. I don't know what you feel about
I don't care about whose idea things are. If they're good ideas, I'll support them. I'm quite happy to do that. I don't think I'm not into ego with this stuff. It doesn't bother me. It's a good idea. You need to support it. And I don't have all the answers. I don't have the answers. I haven't a clue. I don't know how these things can work better, because we're really struggling to try them. So we've just got to experiment with stuff. Yeah. But you have to try it and see what works and see what doesn't work, and refine it, think about it, and then how do you then package it? So if you say, okay, there's some really good stuff here, how can you then package it up and give it to other people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's the good stuff.
Right, so when you've got a little bit of free time, I gave you the last link. I've given you 2 Trello links. The first one is the entire task board to Change the Future. The second one is for the specific card or task relating to the design of the actual wall of ideas, we're calling it. Although we could change the name, but that kind of itemizes the specific different ways we're inviting people to interface with the wall. So proposals, case studies. Okay. So there's various different ways. So yeah, tear that apart, shoot holes in that, and yeah, call me or any of us like anytime. And it'd be wicked if you feel like you've got some time to.
Definitely, I'll definitely find a way of getting involved. Just frozen on me. That's typical Google. Right at the end, it freezes.
Oh. So I'll be happy to come up to London and say hi and bounce some ideas, or come down to Brighton and let's play.
Either. I probably should come down to Brighton soon anyway.
Yeah, it would be lovely, man. I'd love that.
I try to every now and again. Okay, well that's good. I'm not going to read this stuff. I've got to run now, so I'll look at it this afternoon, and I'll try and scribble up. It might just be a picture, actually. It might be literally a one-page picture of this stuff that I've been working on, but it might be the easiest way to do it. So I'll just send you that later, or over the weekend, depending when I get to actually draw it up. You don't want to see it at the moment. It's basically a load of pencil scribbles. It's unintelligible. Okay, really good to talk to you, and let's carry this on.
Thanks for caring.
I wish I didn't sometimes. I'll see you soon. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.